Fire lookout towers are some of the most isolated structures in the country. They sit alone on mountain ridges, miles from the nearest town, with nothing but wind, trees, and open sky surrounding them. For some people, that solitude is peaceful, a place where you can hear your own thoughts and nothing else. For others, it becomes something much different. The stories you're about to hear come from former fire lookouts and hikers who spent nights in those towers completely alone. These are not fictional accounts. These are real submissions from people who say something was out there with them. Something that didn't behave like any animal or any human they knew. And whether you believe them or not, many of these locations are still operational today. Here are 3 creepy true fire lookout horror stories. Story 1. The thing that kept circling my tower. I worked as a seasonal lookout for the Forest Service in northern Idaho. It was one of the quieter regions, so quiet, in fact, that the biggest part of the job was just logging weather and scanning for smoke a couple of times a day. Around my 3rd week on station, something changed. The forest went quiet. Completely quiet. No birds, no movement, not even the usual wind patterns that came through the ridge. I'd worked enough fire seasons to know the difference between natural silence and something being wrong. This was the latter. During the first night of that strange quiet spell, I woke up around 2 a.m. to what I thought was the sound of footsteps. Not animal steps. These were heavy, measured thuds, circling the base of the tower in slow, deliberate patterns. I sat up in bed and listened. Whatever it was moved in full circles, slow ones. Sometimes it stopped directly below me, like it was listening. The most unsettling part was the breathing, a deep, steady inhale and exhale. It wasn't panting like a deer or snorting like a bear. It sounded almost human, but too heavy, too controlled. I grabbed the spotlight and shined it down through the windows, but the circle of light didn't reach the ground clearly. All I caught was the shape of something tall moving just at the edge of the beam, upright, not hunched. The next morning, I climbed down the ladder and checked the perimeter. No tracks, no claw marks, nothing except the lingering feeling that I was being watched from the tree line. Night 2 was worse. Around the same time, I heard it again. Only this time it made a noise, a short, hoarse cough. Not animalistic, but not quite right for a person either. Almost like it was copying something it had heard before, trying to mimic it. That was the moment I realized it wasn't an animal. It circled again and again, and eventually stopped at the tower door. I heard the metal handle twitch, just once. When I shined the spotlight downward, the beam caught a figure standing just outside the light's reach. A head, tall and thin, leaning just slightly to one side. Motionless, like it didn't care it was being seen. I didn't sleep that night. When the sun came up, I climbed down to inspect the door. There were scratches, dozens of them, but they weren't on the outside. They were on the inside of the door, scraped upward, like someone or something had reached through the gap at the bottom and clawed from the inside out. To this day, I still don't understand how that's possible. I transferred to another station the next morning. and the forest stayed quiet for the rest of the season.
Story 2. The Emergency Line Call. This story comes from a lookout who worked the night shift on Mount Eldon in Arizona. Most lookouts only work during the daylight hours, but in some locations, night coverage is necessary to track illegal campfires or lightning after dark. The tower had a small radio station inside, with direct lines to dispatch. One night, around 11 p.m., he received a transmission through the emergency band. A voice, faint and distorted through static. The voice said, "Hello? I'm near the ridge. I need help." But the way it spoke was unnerving. The pacing was wrong. The tone was flat. There were long pauses, like it had to think before each word. He asked their name and location, but the voice just repeated the sentence, almost the same way, but slightly off. "Hello? I'm near the ridge. Help." This time the pitch changed halfway through, like it was imitating the first attempt, but failing to match it. He contacted County Search and Rescue. They checked the hiker logs and radio traffic. Nobody had called for help, and nobody was reported in that section of the ridge. The next night, around the same time, the voice came back, but this time it didn't repeat the same sentence. It whispered his name, not his first name, his last name, the one he didn't use on radio calls. He froze. He hadn't said that name on any channel, ever. He asked the voice how it knew him. A long pause, then an attempt at speech. I know you." Only the "you" sounded warped, like it wasn't a word it knew how to say, but something it was trying to copy. He grabbed thermal binoculars and scanned the area near the ridge. And that's when he saw it. A heat signature. Large, upright, completely motionless, facing his tower. No other shapes around it, no movement, just a vertical column of heat, like a person standing perfectly still. He called for backup again, but by the time a ranger made it to the mountain, the thermal signature was gone. No tracks, no passerby, no lost hiker. He still works with the Forest Service, but he says he never answers emergency band transmissions alone anymore. Especially not the ones that know his name.
Story 3. Lights in the Valley. This last story was submitted by a hiker who spent a night in an old, decommissioned lookout tower in Washington state. He wasn't supposed to be there. The tower was technically off limits, too old, too unstable, but hikers still camped in it for the view. He arrived in the late afternoon, set up his sleeping bag on the wooden floor, and watched the sun fall behind the valley. Around midnight, he woke to flickering orange light coming from the tree line below. At first, he assumed it was a wildfire starting. The light pulsed, grew brighter, then spread horizontally through the trees. He radioed the nearest ranger frequency to report it, but before he could finish describing the location, the light disappeared completely, like someone flipped a switch. A minute later, smaller lights reappeared, this time higher, floating between the dark pine trees, moving slowly in a line, like lanterns being carried by invisible figures. He stepped out onto the catwalk of the tower to get a better view. That's when he heard the first sound. Footsteps. Not from below, from the metal stairs leading up the tower. He froze. The steps were soft, controlled, too light for a bear, too slow for a person in a hurry. Then the footsteps stopped, right outside the door. He waited in silence, holding his breath, hoping it was a hallucination or an animal, but then the door handle began to move. A soft, metallic rattle, slow, deliberate twists. The door was padlocked. Nobody should have been able to open it, but the handle kept turning back and forth with unnatural patience, like something was testing it, studying it. He backed away from the door and pressed himself into a corner. At some point during the night, he heard the footsteps retreat. He didn't dare move until dawn. When he finally climbed down the stairs and checked the area, he saw something that still haunts him. Footprints. Bare footprints. In the dirt around the tower, but they weren't shaped right. They were too long, too narrow, with heel marks too far back and toes stretched out like a handprint, like something had walked on elongated, human-like feet. When he reported the lights and footprints the next day, the ranger he spoke with told him something that made his blood run cold. There were no fire crews operating in that valley, and no fires were reported that night. Not a single one. Whatever he saw, and whatever tried to open the door, had nothing to do with a wildfire, and he never stayed in a lookout tower again. Fire lookout towers might seem peaceful, quiet, detached from the world, but that same isolation can bring out things most people never have to experience. Strange voices, unexplained lights, and creatures that walk like people but aren't human at all. These stories came from real people who were alone on ridges miles away from civilization. No roads, no neighbors, no easy way out. And if their accounts are true, some of these things are still out there, circling towers, calling names, climbing stairs in the dark. If you ever spend the night in a fire lookout, just remember, you're not the only one watching.